Hey, welcome in, everyone. So tonight we're going to explore what I call embodying wisdom. This is kind of meant to be a much longer course. Actually, probably I'm going to launch it as the fall course for my my group mentoring program for the people who work with me in a small group every week. But I thought tonight what we could do is kind of introduce some of the practices that I work with in this realm, introduce the idea of, what the hell am I talking about? What does embodying wisdom mean? It can mean a lot of things, obviously. And I think in particular, because we're at an FPMT center, we're, at a Dharma center, we can talk about how this applies to the Buddhist path. For me, everything I teach applies to the Buddhist path, but I also teach and work with people on two distinct paths that weave together, but they don't have to, meaning like everyone comes to this work with their own needs and goals. But, one is the path of our healthy human beingness, our ability to sit in our bodies in a grounded way, to connect to a sense of our own contentment and okayness, our sense of worth, to connect to a more regulated nervous system, and ability to work with the waves of ups and downs that are inevitable in life. And a lot of people's meditation goals kind of fall into this category. This would be more like the secular area of meditation. And then, of course, you have the Dharma and the Buddha Dharma specifically, which is really aiming not just to work with this life, but it's aiming to work with the mind in its infinite scope. Infinite meaning like this mind is, now kind of, it's stuck in this body, but it's not of this body. It has a much wider scope of what we experience and what we can taste. And so, there's many ways to talk about this. I like to usually talk about our innate Buddha nature, which is just our innate awakened nature that we uncover through the Buddhist path. And what I found over the years that in particular, I really like talking about what we're going to talk about tonight to people interested in Buddhism, because I tend to teach these kinds of practices of finding more groundedness in the body, not necessarily as a self-help, or how would you say, like a secular, let's feel good kind of practice. It's more creating the stability and skills for Buddhist practice to actually work. And that's a little bit controversial, right? It's not my view necessarily. It's a view of one of my root teachers. And I didn't believe him when I first met him because, Patty introduced me briefly, but I come from the FPMT. The FPMT is my original kind of spiritual home. It's where I encountered Tibetan Buddhism initially at, 23 years ago in Boston, Massachusetts. And, I lived in an FPMT center for 3 years, basically being the attendant and cook for a Geshe there, a Geshe Tsogo, who has since died. And, I really was attracted to the classical, traditional, I didn't want anything watered down. I didn't want, someone's Western idea of what they think Tibetan Buddhism is. I wanted Tibetans' idea of what they think Tibetan Buddhism, because Tibetan Buddhism also isn't a singular thing. Tibetans also have varying lineages, obviously, and varying ideas. And from Lama to Lama, there's a famous quote, actually, that as many gurus as there are in the land of Tibet, that's how many dharmas there are. Right? We could see this in our organization, in FPMT, because like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, our one of our founding lamas who just passed away, he was incredibly unique. I mean, he followed the tradition, but he also had his unique way of teaching that and displaying that and trying to make that accessible for us as Western practitioners. So that's all okay. We can have the lineage, and then we have people who are guiding us in different ways through their, it's not so much through their personality, it's through their kind of like compassion and activity, where, you know, they've woken up to their Buddha nature to a certain extent, and then they can guide us in what they think is most helpful as a way to access the Dharma. So anyways, this is all to say, you know, I came to these teachings to Buddha Dharma pretty interested in the classical approach. And as Patty said, I became a monk in 2008, and I went into retreat under Lama Zopa Rinpoche's direction. And his direction was meditate on the Lamrim and realize Lamrim. You know, so for some of you who know what I mean, like, you know, that's it's quite a, you know, a strong feat, meaning like, you know, not just understand it, not just, you know, be able to regurgitate it, but actually like transform your mind through it. So, you know, I view that as a lifetime, you know, plural lifetimes thing. That's not something I accomplished necessarily, but I did familiarize myself more with the Lamrim, and was able to go through it many, many times in depth over 3 years. And also what I noticed in that 3 years, well, actually, I didn't notice it until I connected with my second root teacher. But also I just noticed a lot of discontent, a lot of always looking, you know, not feeling settled in my body, you know, anxiety, let's just call part of it that. And also an inability to develop more wider scopes of stability in my meditation practice, right? Because I think a large part of this is stability, because we can understand the Dharma, we can have some taste of these things, you know, whatever the topic is in the Lamrim of bodhicitta or compassion or perfect human rebirth or emptiness, but actually stabilizing the experience is the harder part, you know, because it takes stability of or, you know, stability or appliancy of body and mind. So, you know, we're not talking about appliance here, but just a little more stability. And so when I encountered Soni Rinpoche, who's actually a really close friend of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's, they spent actually quite a bit of time doing pujas together in the last few years. And I met Soni Rinpoche in 2010. And initially when I met him, his approach was kind of revolutionary. One was because he teaches in a different lineage than Lama Zopa Rinpoche, so there's a slightly different approach to the teachings on emptiness. He focuses more on a Vajrayana lineage of practicing emptiness we call Dzogpa Chenpo, or the Great Perfection. But also, he, over his teaching in the West of 20 or 30 years, he just noticed a lot of people did not have a connection to the type of okayness that he often saw in other cultures, specifically like Nepali culture. So he's Tibetan, but he was born on the border of Nepal and Tibet. And you know, he noticed, and he just sort of asked why. You know, why are Westerners so unsettled? He was kind of curious about it, and he also noticed that Westerners, after he started out by kind of teaching in a classical way, where it was like based on a lot of understanding first, you know, where we study philosophy, we study the Dharma a lot, we get a really good understanding, and then we apply it to meditation. But he saw that Westerners he was working with had a lot of obstacles to that there was sort of, they had good understanding, and there could, you know, kind of seem like they were making progress, but their minds weren't changing. The conduct wasn't changing, you know, the behavior wasn't changing. To put it bluntly, and this isn't his words, this is more my words, you know, what I see in my own practice, and then I see it also in people I work with, if we don't end up being able to transform our self-absorption, the Dharma doesn't go that far. It really doesn't. It just continues to feed our own selfish pursuits. And yet this is like a direct way we say it in the teachings, but until we connect to our own sense of worth and our own sense of essence love, is one way to put it, it's very difficult for that to go in the right direction, because, you know, we hear the teachings on Lojong or something like that, and there's this sense of like, yeah, I understand my self-absorption is a problem, but then we practice Dharma, you know, still we don't know how to switch that, because we don't like ourselves fundamentally, you know, we don't have a sense of loving care for ourselves. And then of course, the whole self-help, you know, self-care movement, which I think there's a lot of positive things in that, it can benefit us, but it can also be used as another resource to just build up our self-interest. So, what is this gap here, essentially, And so Soni Rinpoche, he really discovered it's a gap of not being able to connect with, or having disconnected from, our own essence love. He calls it that because what he means is it's essential. It's an essence because it's something we're born with. It's something like when you see, like I have a 7-month-old daughter now, and when she's not cranky, she's quite innocent and just kind of free. There's no sense of like, I'm bad or good. There's no sense of, I'm missing something fundamentally in my being. There's just a sense of openness and innocence and kind of like directness in her emotions. Now, as we become adults, we have to temper our emotions sometimes because it's not appropriate to just, suddenly like scream in the middle of a meeting or, laugh inappropriately or something like that. And via that process, as well as, the materialism we're often dealing with in modern Western culture, slowly we condition ourselves out of essence love. And essence love, another way to talk about it, is just a sense of our innate okayness, just a sense that I'm okay, even though I can make mistakes, even though sometimes I want to improve things in my life. Sometimes I disappoint people or whatever. I'm not a disappointing person. I'm not fundamentally a screwed up person. And, this doesn't affect all people in the same way. I live in Mexico. It's a little different here. I find the more modern a place is and the more materialism there is, usually we suffer more from this sense of lack. Some call it low self-worth. I think it's a little tricky because we are talking about worthiness here, but we're more talking about the sense of innate worth, that like we're already worthy. There's no one we need to prove that to. It's already there. And what I find is it's very difficult to develop genuine loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta on the Buddhist path if we don't have this. There's a disconnect. There's a sense of always something is missing. Some of you might experience this, and I apologize if this is too direct, by sort of jumping from one practice to another. You get excited about a certain Buddhist practice, and then you're like, wow, and you kind of pursue that, and then that doesn't go anywhere, or you get you don't get what you want, and then you move on to something else. And thankfully, we have the merit to be able to do it in the Dharma, so it still has benefit, right? Even if we're doing it that way, because we get imprints. We're in the self-help world. I'm not sure how much benefit it actually has long-term. But in the Dharma world, we're connecting with a sutra, or we're connecting with a certain teacher we really like, or we're connecting with a principle of Buddhism. But we can't carry it through because there's this basic sense that we're not worthy of that. And this is very subtle what I'm talking about. It's not something conscious. It's something we often don't find out until we do the work to remedy it. So what does this have to do with embodying wisdom? It has to do with that because it's the body where the constriction or the distortion happens. It's not in the thinking mind. So this is one of the things we often mistake, because we're training the thinking mind a lot in the West, and Tibetan Buddhism is very skilled at training the thinking mind. They start there for Himalayan practitioners because culturally, most Himalayan practitioners were already connected to their essence love. They didn't need to talk about essence love because people were connected to it. But what they needed to do was educate the mind conceptually, introduce the Dharma in language, introduce complex ways to reason and think about the mind and the Dharma, and then teach how to meditate on that. For us, we often come to the Dharma highly educated. We come to the Dharma with at least, a high school education, if not, more. And at the same time, our thinking mind is one of the reasons we come to the Dharma, because we're sick of it. Our thinking mind is overwhelming. It's exhausting. It's constantly spinning. We don't know how to get away from it. And we're a slave to our thinking mind. All the while, we don't feel okay. We feel like something's not okay, And I'm not talking about like on the outside. This is very down deep, you know, and sometimes we play this out in relationships. We play this out in ways of sort of proving or validating ourselves at work, or validating ourselves through certain activities. And, you know, not everybody experiences this in a heavy way. So it can be to different degrees. So essentially, what happens is a distortion in the body, a distortion of unlovability. You know, I mean, why is therapy, modern Western therapy, such a lucrative industry? It's because most of us do not feel lovable. You know, it's another way to talk about essence love. We don't have that connection. We don't feel lovable, and so we're healing that wound of lovability, or there's been a trauma that's interrupted that connection. So the premise here is that it's not a thinking mind problem. It's a body problem. Body meaning in the emotions, in the energies in the body, in subtler energies that we talk about in the Tibetan medical systems. And so what we're doing here, you know, the first practice I want to introduce is learning to connect in a compassionate way with feeling. So what happens in a way is, for some of us, we get cut off from feeling. We get cut off from being okay with a feeling that's more raw and vulnerable. And we have, you know, 101 outlets to ignore or distract ourselves from feeling the feeling. You know, this is one thing also. It's like a combination of things, you know, so don't take it personal. It's just sort of cultural, you know, because generally the pursuit in the West is a pursuit of comfort. And the comfort in itself kind of blocks our connection to feeling, because we don't have to feel. We can just sort of turn on another show, we can buy another thing, we can break up with our boyfriend, get a new one, you know, whatever it is, right? So, you know, we all have our version of this. And then some of us fall into deep loneliness, deep depression, deep disconnect, you know. So there's a whole range of what happens from this kind of core wound. But the good news is it can be reconnected. And the good news is it can be reconnected by meeting and learning to be with the feeling world again. And in order to do this, we need to take a risk. The risk is that we're not going to engage our cognitive reasoning mind to try to figure out when there's a strong emotion or a strong sensation, or, you know, one of, you know, we would say, Sonia Rinpoche calls them beautiful monsters. They're kind of repeating wounds, you know, like I have a beautiful monster of, I have a bunch. He actually says if we don't have any, we're not normal. So if, you know, so once you understand what a beautiful monster is, you don't have to worry. It means you're normal. Yeah, I could probably name two or three. You know, I have one where, you know, I feel unheard, you know, most of my life, not all the time, but sometimes I feel unheard. And then it's this wound of like, you know, it triggers this wound of not being seen or something like that. I have another wound of just, I would call it expresses itself as anxiety, but it's more this sense of like not feeling safe. I don't quite know what it is. And that's one of the beauties. We don't have to know what it is. We just have to meet it, you know, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, the practice. And then, you know, I got a bunch of other ones, but to me, they're kind of all invited to the party. And this is in relation to the, you know, the main practice I wanted to share tonight. There's a bunch of different practices I want to share, but I kind of thought I'd just feel it out and see what comes up as we kind of gather here. But this practice, Sonia Rinpoche calls it handshake practice. And it is a practice of meeting the feeling world with kindness. And the kindness here is the kindness of non-judgment, awareness. And we don't have to bring compassion, because meeting the feeling without an agenda is the compassion. You know, meeting a feeling with the kindness of non-judgment is the compassion. And so we'll go through it in a few minutes. I just want to kind of prepare you for what it is. So it has three elements. It has this element of dropping into the feeling world. So we drop our conceptual thinking mind and we attempt to feel the feeling. That's the first element. The second element is meeting the feeling world. And this just means meeting whatever's up. It doesn't have to be anything specific. For some people, they experience numbness when they meet their feeling world. For others, they're just kind of like, maybe there's not a strong thing or uncomfortable thing that's arising. So they just meet something neutral or comfortable. It's fine. We can practice with whatever. So that's the second part, is meeting. And then the third part is really the meditation aspect here, which is letting be. And letting be is pulled from, this does have a Dharma connection. It's not a new age kind of, practice. Letting be is pulled from the Mahamudra traditions. So the Mahamudra traditions exist in most of the lineages in Tibet, including the Gelugpa lineage. And Mahamudra specializes in working with the nature of mind, but it also specializes in techniques where we're not accepting or rejecting phenomena. And what this means is, we're not accepting it in the sense of like we're holding enough awareness within the practice that we're not becoming the afflictive emotion, as an example, or thought, but we're also not rejecting the afflictive emotion or thought. So this is very powerful medicine in the Dharma, because it allows us to navigate and connect with the true nature of reality through not doing anything with the distortion that's happening. And the distortion here would be like, a thought is a type of distortion in Buddhism, even a good thought, because a thought is, I'm not saying a good thought isn't helpful. I'm just saying it's still considered just a distortion. And so, because a thought is an image of something, it's not the thing. It's an image of the thing. It's false. And so, in a sense, when we're working with that kind of distortion, we can counter it with like, for those of you who studied a little more extensively with middle way reasonings or Madhyamaka, we counter it sometimes with reasonings, where we use logical reasonings to kind of whittle down or chip at the solidity of a thought, or the solidity of an emotion, or the solidity of the self, right? And we use the thinking mind to do that. So we use the thinking mind to chip away at the thinking mind, which is very ingenious. Nagarjuna is really the heir of pulling that out of Buddhist teachings. And then, this is a prime method in Tibetan Buddhism. But as I said, there's also these other methods, like in Mahamudra, where we find we don't use the thinking mind necessarily. We just use this process of awareness that it's not acceptance in the sense of acknowledging. It can acknowledge, but it doesn't become, and it doesn't reject, right? And so we could talk about more in Q&A, like if you want to go deeper into that, why is that useful, etc. But the handshaking is very similar. So letting be, this third aspect of the practice we're going to do, it basically refers to we're not suppressing what's arising, right? Normally, like a deep, uncomfortable emotion or sensation or energy arises in us, and some of us suppress it. Basically, it means we're rejecting it. We're saying, you're not okay, you're not allowed here, go away. That's essentially the message we're telling the emotion. The emotion doesn't care what you think, actually. It really doesn't. It has its own life. It was created, in a sense, through an event, or let's say, I was describing some ways our conditioned kind of modern life creates hollowness for us, or other kinds of emotional problems. And, it's there. It's some kind of distortion in the subtle body. And so in and of itself, it just wants to be heard. It doesn't need us to lecture it, or to order it around, or to be its boss, or to, become a dictator over it. And so that's the first thing we work with, of not rejecting it. But there's a problem in that, right? If you don't reject something or suppress it that is uncomfortable, it takes us over, right? We get hijacked by it, and then we're in pain. So that's the second aspect. We're also not becoming what's arising, right? Or we're practicing this. This is really more the language. We're practicing not rejecting, suppressing, or becoming it. And becoming it means we've lost awareness. That's really what the definition is, because it's still a meditation practice. So, you'll see in a moment, basically when we meet and let be, it's just raw awareness, this quality of mind that can be watchful, that we train in shamatha or meditative awareness practice. It's quality of mind that's watchful, and we're watchful and feeling. So the feeling is feeling the feeling, but there's a watchfulness in the mind. And it's that watchfulness that allows us not to get hijacked or to become. So getting emotional, crying, opening to the emotion, feeling is not becoming it in this. It's not a problem in this practice. That's not what we mean by becoming. Becoming means we've lost awareness, and then now we're completely co-opted by it. Like anger is a good one, a good example for this. Like when we really get angry, it's not that we're angry, we are anger. Like we've become it, we personalized it. We've fully merged with the anger. And that's the problem here. It's the identity. It's the way it's personalized. So that second piece, when we're working with not becoming, as long as we have awareness, it's fine. Third, we're trying not to run away from it, which could be a reaction for some because it's uncomfortable, and sometimes we've built ourselves up to not feel uncomfort or to reject it or to run away from it. And then the fourth is really, I think, the main feature of letting be or training in letting be, which is not trying to fix, change, or manipulate the emotion at all. And this one's really difficult because, most of us rely on our thought rumination or our thinking to somehow get out of an uncomfortable situation or emotion. But I don't know, think about it for yourself. Has that worked? Well, for me, not so much. I mean, it might temporarily work, but I think for me, it's only temporarily work because it's some sort of a suppression is happening, right? Where I'm talking the emotion down, trying to convince myself of the reasoning why this happened, where it happened, how, and that it's okay, like everything's okay. But on a kind of deeper down level in the body, everything's not okay, right? The emotion doesn't necessarily resolve, or if I suppress it, it's still there, it's just not as strong. So this fourth aspect is really I think the approach as well of bringing in, elements of Mahamudra practice, or we call it the Great Seal. That's how we translate the Tibetan from those lineages and practices, because we're not trying to change something. We're not trying to manipulate our experience to our will. We're letting go of control, essentially. So what this does is it allows over time, as we develop this, most of us are not going to be able to do this right away. It's a practice we develop. But over time, things are allowed to unwind in the body in their own way. So there's a lot of somatic therapy practices that also employ things similar to this nowadays. They're a little bit different. I find this one to be kind of unique, and I like it because it's connected to Buddhism. But, often we think we need to do something with something that's arising and that's uncomfortable, but often what we need to do is not do anything at all. But what we do need to do is to be with it, right? And the letting be in itself is the compassion here. So, in the title of this, Embodying Wisdom, practices for spaciousness, compassion, and wisdom, that's the compassion aspect. How do we have compassion for an emotion that's arising? And in this sense, I found the most profound way to work with our emotions in a compassionate way is to train in being with them. And just the way I described, not rejecting, not becoming, not running away, or not trying to fix or change. So that's the handshake practice. And, just to say a little bit more about it, it's not so intuitive in the beginning, depending on our background. So I recommend just going slow with yourself and don't put too many expectations. Actually, one of the kind of core elements of it is to not expect anything. We just sort of show up and we try our best to meet the body and feeling as we can. But depending on our background and particular practice, a lot of us don't have a lot of what they call in the psychology world interoceptive awareness, which is, our ability to meet a feeling and be with a feeling. For me, this was not intuitive at all in the beginning. It was sort of like relearning a whole new language. So I say that not to set you up in any kind of way, just to sort of recommend that really the approach here is as a practice, meaning not outcome based, and that it is a lot like learning a new language, unless you've already done some somatic therapies or some other kinds of practice. No, soma or somatic can mean a lot of different things. Like a lot of people, movement is a type of somatic work, right? Like yoga and those kinds of things. This is very different than that, because a lot of us are not used to feeling the space inside the body. And often that's a confusing place because we might not have a strong emotion, but we might have a kind of enigmatic energy. And then immediately the thinking mind is trying to figure that out, or we dismiss it or we suppress it, right? So instead here, we're giving time and space to meet that feeling in the body. And to me, I just, I don't know who's in the room. I mean, I know Patty, but I don't know what y'all's practice is like. And I look forward to hearing more when we do some discussion. But to me, I was not into this, like I said, I was a monk. I was like, anything smells like New Age, I'm out. Like, I'm not in, like Islam and Tsongkhapa all the way, Guru Rinpoche all the way. Like, none of this weird, meditation app business, And again, I've changed. That was, I don't know, a long time ago, 12 years ago. I'm much more flexible now. But at the same time, I'm sure most of you are not as dogmatic as I was. So I'm not going to say you were. But, sometimes I think it's actually not a bad thing to hesitate when we're bringing in new practices and things, because how do you put it? It is good, I think, in a way, to want to keep things clean and clear with our path. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do a spiritual path these days. One way is what I call the kitchen sink approach, where you throw in a little Buddhism. Oh, Babaji's here. Okay, throw in another, throw in some Hindu stuff. Why don't just go ahead and throw in some little mushroom microdosing while you're at it. Then maybe a little ayahuasca. Then some kind of like, what's that guy? Wim Hof. Yeah, throw in some Wim Hof technique. And then no wonder we get confused. It's like, no wonder the soup tastes awful, And so, this is very popular a lot of these days because we like to make our own. Part of American values is making our own, kind of making our own thing. So yeah, that can be harmful, I think, that kind of kitchen soup approach, unless we're just trying to check things out. But once we've decided on a path, it is good to be clean and clear and see like, hey, what does this path recommend? But I found the handshake to be incredibly, I was telling my story. Yeah. So initially I was a little bit skeptical of it. I think if it wasn't a Tibetan Lama who's an actual lineage holder teaching me it, I would have dismissed it. But because I saw Sonia Rinpoche had so much wisdom and insight and clearly knew the Buddhist path really well, and not only knew it really well, he, I believe he has deep experience of it. I trusted him. And because of that, it changed my life. So that's why I'm sharing it here with you. And it changed my Buddhist practice. Not changed it in the sense of like it changed what I do. I do the same thing. I do what all you do. I do Lam Rim. I do shamatha, vipassana meditations, different kinds of deity yoga practices, the path. What changed is it opened up the ability to connect with my feeling world. Of course, on a just human level, it healed some, it's helped me with some wounds I suffer with. But on a Dharma level, it helped me to connect with a less conceptual practice of the Dharma. That I think is invaluable, because I think it's something we really struggle with in Tibetan Buddhism in the West. Yeah, I see it because I work with lots of different practitioners. I teach in different organizations and I see it. And it's something it's something like, you don't know it until you know it, no matter how much someone says or points it out, And so I often you know, sometimes the more we know in the Dharma, the more actually we suffer from this, because we also get pride on top of it, you know, where we build up, maybe, you know, maybe you all aren't in this position, but, you know, some people have been doing this a long time. They get pride, myself included, of like, you know, knowing a lot of things, but really not much is transformed. You know, you really look at their conduct and they're still self-absorbed. And I'm pointing at me, you know, I'm not pointing at anyone else. Like, for me, my primary practice is to cut through self-absorption, you know? And so that's it, you know? And so, but like, that's very strong medicine. So we need to also understand how to do that compassionately. So for me, this approach of doing it through the feeling world has been so helpful, because it allows compassion that my self-absorption doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. This is the difference. I probably would have said something different about 15 or 20 years ago. I would have said, you know, there's something wrong with me and I'm somehow a bad person, or, you know, I wouldn't say it maybe so bluntly, but I felt that. And so sometimes we can suffer from that with the teachings, where we're kind of like, I'm the worst practitioner ever. Oh, I'm the, you know, I'm the lowest. How am I ever going to do this? You know, that's all that will not get us enlightened, in my opinion, because it's a distortion. But same with the other side, you know, I'm the best, you know, I know everything. That's also, you know, the self aggrandized. So I think this element of connecting back with our essence love, connecting back with a sense of just being okay, you know, we can start to understand and really, how do you say it, have conviction that we have Buddha nature. Buddha nature is really based on connecting with emptiness, but I think it can be inferred easier when we have a sense of okayness, because in that sense of okayness, there's not this sense that we are a screwed up person. And I don't know, this is very subtle. It's very subtle in Western, I would just say, you know, United States culture. Somehow a lot of us get this. We get this kind of disease of, you know, I call it kind of original sin. And then when we bring that to Buddhism, because it's not even an idea, I think it's something that makes its way into our bodies. But when we practice Buddhism with that distortion in the body, of original sin, that we're originally kind of like messed up or something, the Dharma just becomes, it doesn't, I don't know, it's hard to penetrate the essence of it. So yeah, I want to go into practice now. I'm going to keep talking, but I hope this is helpful. You know, some of us need to have a little bit of information to trust something. Some of us don't. Maybe this made it worse. Maybe you're like, just shut up and practice, you know, let's practice. So I don't know. Different people are different ways. But for me, there's a deep value in connecting with our okayness. And then when we practice the Dharma from there, we can really generate, you know, a way to work with self-absorption as our true enemy in a healthy way. Because see, it's so tricky, because we say self-absorbed. What does that mean? That means, for me, that means I'm misperceiving self, you know? I'm misperceiving that self, in the sense that I've become the most important, you know? I've become more important than others. And why does that cause me suffering? Because I'm always preoccupied with that. And there's no fluidity. It's just very simple. You know, it's not anything profound. It's like there's no fluidity. There's no give and take. It's like every little thing hurts, you know? And yet the Lojong teachings, as an example, like I'm just bringing that in, the mind training teachings about 15 years ago, for me, they didn't go in the right direction initially, because I didn't like myself. I didn't have a connection to essence love. So everything felt like an attack, like I needed to attack self. You know what I mean? Have any of you seen that in the Dharma like this? Because the language is like that. Sort of like, you know, attack the true enemy, the self-absorption or something like that. But we might mistake that as, you know, attack the self more. But actually, I think it's not so much attacking the self, it's understanding the misperception. But to understand that and still have okayness, essence love is important, like connecting or reconnecting to our essence love. That's what I was trying to say. Okay, so let's do some practice. So if you haven't, just go ahead and, gather a seat for yourself that you feel comfortable for practice. We'll probably do, like 15 minutes. So then we have a good 30 minutes to just chat. So we're going to do like a more vigorous dropping first, and then I'm going to reintroduce dropping, but you don't have to do it in a vigorous way. Each time vigorous means like this, we're gonna raise our arms, and then we're going to, I can't because I have a microphone here, but we're gonna drop them like this while we breathe out. So it's like this. And simultaneously, we're dropping our attention and awareness down into the body. Like, let's say somewhere in your gut or legs or somewhere in the the mid to lower body. So really, when you breathe out and you drop, let go and drop. Okay. So we'll do that on 3 together. 1, 2, 3. You can close your eyes if you want. And as you drop your awareness into the body, just meet the feeling world. Sensations, emotions if they're arising, energies, which are more subtler sensations. And meeting means kind of like saying hi. You're just meeting it. Allow the awareness to be there, but you're not controlling anything. You're just meeting whatever's present, and it's okay, whatever that is. Some of you might be like, I don't know what to meet. No worries. Just meet whatever's there. Could even just be a physical sensation, like your hand, the feeling of your hand on your leg, or the feeling of your seat below you. Could start there. And right away, we also incorporate this third aspect of letting be. And letting be means after we meet, we don't do anything with it. We just feel while being aware. So again, awareness is this quality of mind we train in. Pretty much all meditation practice involves awareness. It's this quality of watchfulness, quality of observation. But we're not observing coldly. We're feeling the feeling. And the watchfulness, maybe let's just say it's a little bit off to the side. It's not looking directly at it. It's not trying to see something profound. So within the letting be, just allowing the feeling, emotion, sensation to exist. And we meet it with kindness, the kindness of non-judgment, of not trying to suppress, not trying to run away or fix it with the thinking mind. And so you can either do a drop again if you like, dropping the arms and breathing out, or you can just drop internally. Each time you notice that you start ruminating or suppressing, or for some of us, we tighten up in the body as a form of suppression if something is painful. And if something is too painful, meaning it's too overwhelming, just drop into another part of the body. Usually the feet or fingers often are safer spaces where we don't have a lot of emotion, usually no emotion. And then you can slowly come back and try to meet things that are a little more activated. But since we're doing this on the spot, some of us don't experience, strong emotions or strong wounds in the body, emotional, energetic, or wounds of sensation. Not like they're arising all the time. So just meet what's there. Could be a pleasant experience or a neutral one, and you're just practicing the elements of the practice with that, which is to meet, let be. So the hardest thing sometimes is not doing anything, especially if it's uncomfortable. So also just notice your tendencies of wanting to do something with it, wanting to fix, wanting to solve if it's something uncomfortable. Like I said, some of us suppress, some of us just immediately get co-opted by it. And then just remember awareness, drop again, repeat the process. So each time we veer off, just repeat the process. Come back to step one, drop, then meet, and let be. And this is quite different than other meditation practices. It's not so much about focus or practicing with the breath or something like that. It's literally just feeling the feeling. And sometimes I say, it's the practice of allowing, where, I'm, just to give you an idea what I'm doing, I'm just feeling kind of my space in between my heart space all the way down to my abdomen. And I'm just waiting. Sometimes strong things aren't up. Mainly what I feel is a little bit of tiredness. So I'm just being with the tiredness. But I'm also allowing whatever wants to come can come. Sometimes this comes into my mind as a sense of like a theater, a stage where the lights are on, the stage, like the drapes are open, and anything can come up and be seen if it wants to. If it doesn't want to, that's also fine. The more we have that very subtle invitation, we're not forcing anything, but we're also open. Sometimes little creatures start to come out of the woods. Sometimes our beautiful monsters or our woundings in the body, they're afraid of us because we're harsh on them. We suppress them. We talk down to them. We try to outsmart them with our thinking mind. So they need time. Sometimes they're kind of raging monsters that are really scary to meet. So we just meet them gently without an agenda. Like I said, if you need to go to another part of the body first that's more neutral, just be with that, be with the feet. Just like any meditation practice, we're going to become distracted and you just drop again. Bring your awareness into the body again. So the hardest thing here is there's really nothing to do. It's very simple. Sometimes I say there's nothing to get, but there's something to get used to. Getting used to just being with the feeling world, feeling the feeling world, and remaining aware of that, very light awareness. At some point, you might feel the feeling world smile back to you, this sense of appreciation for finally just acknowledging it. An analogy is popping in my mind. I ended up on a lot of my examples are YouTube examples lately. Ended up on a YouTube page of a guy who goes into really beautiful forests in, I think he's in Europe, in the UK somewhere, in really beautiful, lush green forests. And he hunts for, like not to kill them, but just to see them for pixies and goblins and, mythical forest creatures. And him and his partners, I think they create some kind of CGI. And so he's sitting there and, eventually this little creature comes out of the rocks, a little pixie or gnome or something. And he's a good actor, so he makes it seem like it's kind of like a nature show, and that he's introducing us to this mythical creature that you can find in the forests of the UK or Sweden or something. And yeah, it's obviously a CGI image, but it's pretty good. It looks pretty real. And I was just feeling that right now, kind of, the forest of our body, the jungle of our body or our feeling world is often a scary place. It's like a wild place. There's all these, fierce creatures that can be in there, old wounds, traumas. There's also these small little gnomes and pixies, who, if we're quiet enough, if we just allow ourselves to be present and feeling, they start to come out. They come out of the rocks, they come out of the trees. They're curious because finally we're doing something different. We're not trying to suppress them. We're not trying to boss them around or fix them. This is what compassion looks like. Compassion is the willingness to be with our own pain. And we don't have to be broken down by that pain. We're being with it, and so we can break open and through. Again, maybe we'll do a drop together. We'll practice for 5 more minutes. Let's do a more conscious drop. So we'll lift up our hands, and on 3, 1, 2, 3, just drop it in the body. Creates a little gap, right? Be with the gap. It's enough. Allow yourself to feel whatever is arising. Wherever you dropped, just feel that. Again, sensation, emotion, subtler energy, stagnation or movement. And we wait with that. Also drop the thinking mind into the body. This means just thoughts are allowed to arise. We're not blocking thoughts. But we're not deliberately engaging the thinking process. Of course, easier said than done. Just allow thoughts to come and go, and you're primarily, let's say, about 75% with the feeling world. It gives the mind something to do as well. In a way, what I find so precious in this practice is finally we're giving ourselves permission where we can just be. We don't have to do anything. But we're also not checking out. There's awareness. Practice for a few more minutes together. I'll leave some silence just for you to guide yourself. And again, as many times as you need to drop, either consciously or internally, dropping the head down into the body. Just allow that drop to take place and feel and be. Meet, let be. And so just for the last 10 or 20 seconds here, just allow your eyes to open. Just the gaze to rest in the space in front of you or a little bit below you. Just continue the practice, continue to be with the body, but now with the eyes open. Sometimes this is really helpful when we're getting sleepy in the practice, or we're getting really entrenched, or we're kind of stuck in something. We open the eyes, there's a sense of space we can bring in. Still feeling the feeling, the eyes being open and relaxed. Hey, thanks so much for your practice. All right, so I'd love to hear. Well, first off, just as a request, if some of you are okay turning on your cameras, I'd love to see you. I know iPad Patty is you, Patty, so no worries. But yeah, the majority have their cameras turned off, so I appreciate it just because it makes Zoom a little warmer when we're communicating. Yeah, so how did it go? I mean, anything's welcome. This is our chance to just chat a little bit. I'd love to hear either how the practice went, or if you have any questions from, just the Dharma talk on this. We can kind of continue our exploration through conversation. Anything's welcome, by the way. The good, the bad, the ugly, it's all welcome.
So it is kind of weird sharing when people can see me and I can't see them, but
Sure.
Yeah, I would say probably for the past 5 months, I've felt like there was someone standing on my chest and my heart is here in my throat, and nothing wrong with me. It's all, nothing wrong with me. And, I've tried the dropping practice, and I think maybe I finally got it. I've been really fighting against it, I think, but because that's become so prevalent, I was really able to just sit with it. And kind of like, I think how you described having compassion for it. And yeah, and it was very helpful because I could actually stay out of the emotion a little bit of it without repressing it, because I'm very good at repression and ignoring, and very good. I'm a master. So it was nice. I think it was a little bit of breakthrough. I don't know. Maybe something got pushed away. So yeah.
Wonderful. What did you feel free to go into as much detail as you want, or don't want, but more I'm asking you like a somatic question now. Somatic means like in the feeling itself, and you can describe it in colors, and it doesn't have to be in complete sentences, but what did you notice? Like what did that breakthrough feel like? Maybe that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, it felt like an acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
That it was there, and it wasn't going to go away. It did relax a little bit. It was still there, but it felt a little bit more relaxed. So I think it was, acceptance is probably the best way I can describe it, because so in the recent past, it's been hard to be aware of emotions and not get completely in them. Yeah. And so this was kind of the and yes, this was just a physical feeling. And so maybe I'm not working with physical feelings in this practice, which is what I'm supposed to be working with. So there's the aspect of finally maybe understanding what the practice is supposed to be.
Got it. Yeah.
So it's taking me a while for that to click, to sink in. And so I think just experiencing the point of the practice, not the outcome, the point.
Yeah.
And so it enabled me to be aware, but I did have that feeling of compassion for it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Good. I mean, it sounds good in the sense, like, keep going, right? Like, you know, then there's kind of, yeah, we could talk about it more later if it comes up, but yeah, because it's sometimes we get really centered on there needing to be an outcome. And what's so interesting with this practice is it's more learning another process of how to work with ourselves in our feeling world. So it sounds like that clicked for you. So that's what I was going to say. Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Keep going. And yeah, compassion's a tricky one, because I think compassion is not, it's not heady at all, you know, and yet it's hard to access it sometimes, because it means being with something uncomfortable, usually, whether it's our own pain or someone else's pain. And usually, you know, most of us resist that. You know, we think, oh, there's something wrong if it's uncomfortable, right? So that acceptance I'm hearing is a piece of finally maybe, some insight happening where it's not wrong to feel uncomfortable, you know?
Yeah. And I think for me personally, there's another piece to it too, where getting the mixing up, saying, okay, I'm going to have compassion for that, as opposed to saying, oh, you poor thing, get over yourself. So it's yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, really good. Yeah, it's kind of more like here we're learning to be the compassion.
Yeah.
Because the letting be is the compassion. It's just so counterintuitive, because it doesn't seem like enough.
No, it
You know,
doesn't. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there's something in the Dharma, just a side note, really. I was reflecting on this today. There's something in the Dharma when we read traditional Buddha Dharma in words and language, it seems like it's pointing to something so, I don't know how to put it. When we experience it through practice, it's not as big as it sounds in the words. Like compassion is a big word, you know, just use that as an example. And I think compassion also, the meaning gets a little bit mixed up. You know, there's different meanings of what compassion is. I mean, in Buddhism, we just say, you know, compassion is the wish for ourselves, or the aspiration for ourselves and others to be free from suffering and its causes. And yeah, there is an idea to acquaint ourselves with in that, you know, to get acquainted with in the four boundless states and other kinds of compassion practices and bodhicitta. But as a representation of how to be, that's not clear. Like the language it can't describe that, because it's something beyond language, right? So I think capturing compassion in the sense of, like, when we are letting be, it's compassion. You know, like that is compassion in action when it comes to our emotions, right? Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Thanks, Patty. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah. Keep going. It sounds like a good shift. Yeah. Anyone else? Welcome to share, you know, anything that happened to practice, questions you have. It's okay if it's also kind of, you just want more clarity, or kind of like intellectual clarity on the practice. That's fine too. Patty's heard it before. Like you've heard this practice before from me, right?
Yeah, but I never really got it till today. So yeah.
Good. Awesome. Yeah, please.
I'm very, very new to exploring Buddhism. So, I mean, even as you were talking and writing down words, so I could quickly look it up. But first of all, what do I want to say? I work as a therapist, so getting in touch with your feelings is like a big, big thing.
Yeah.
On what you're feeling, and then figuring things out and understanding and tracing back. So this is all like a whole new way of dealing with my feelings. I really related to what you said, Scott, about, our minds are getting tired of them. I intellectualize everything, and sometimes I just want to go, just stop it.
Yeah.
Stop. And it's hard for me. It's hard for me to do that. I got very relaxed in this meditation, so much so that I started to nod off, which it wasn't my goal. But in my nodding off, I had a flash of somebody that I'm angry with.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I saw her face like really clearly being angry too. Whatever that means, I don't know. And then I went deeper into the meditation, but that's about as close as I got to. I mean, it's in there, it's in my body, right? If I'm angry at somebody, it's in there. And I'm working on being compassionate with myself anyway. That's something I've been working on doing. So I can do that for other people, but sometimes not for myself. But I'm doing a lot better with that, but not necessarily through Buddhism. Although Buddhism is complementing what I want to be anyway, or who I want to be. I'm babbling, and that's my share. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Do you mind if I share a few things back? Some feedback based on what you said. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, if you're completely new to the Dharma, I was kind of tonight. I was aiming it at people familiar with traditional Dharma and giving a little bit of an approach to something that is a little bit outside the box of the traditional Buddhist path, though it's in there. Whenever there's awareness, that's the core of Buddhist meditation, is awareness. So thanks for being patient with all the terms and stuff like that. And it all that comes, as you study Buddhism. So it's no worries, like anything else, the terms and stuff. But wonderful that you, commenting on the therapy. I think, there's these elements of modern Western therapy where a lot of it is cognitive based, because that's what we're good at, and it's also a safe place, right? Like for me, the cognitive is safe. Now for me, this kind of practice has become safe, but in the beginning, it was not safe, to be in my body. It was not safe at all. The thinking mind was safe. And so I think, in a lot of Western therapy, we see that because it offers a way in for people. So it's very useful, And then what I found at a certain point, I mean, this isn't just sort of in a Buddhist context, like, so Peter Levine, part of somatic experiencing. There's another method called Hakomi, which is really powerful. There's one called, I'm forgetting the name now. There's another popular somatic, somatic therapy has also become more popular in the last 5 to 10 years. And then, of course, like, you're a professional, so you're going to use your tools to help someone, wherever they're at. And I think specifically, I consider like therapists are on the front lines often. And front lines, I mean, like, personally, like I don't work with people with complex trauma, or capital T trauma is what I call it, or I will only work with them if they already have a therapist. Because this handshake practice, this is not the first step for most of those people. This would be a step later down the road. First step is just like you're saying, working cognitively, reframing things, all of that. But at some point, from the perspective of this practice, and I think other somatic modalities, the core wounds are locked in the body. We don't know where. Some people say like the fascia, some people say the psyche. Really Soden Rinpoche's approach here is he's connecting this to Tibetan medicine. And in Tibetan medicine, we work with something called the subtle body. And the subtle body is it sounds a bit woo-woo when people encounter it first because they hear chakras in like, weird ways. But actually, in Tibetan culture, it's just part of the medical tradition. It's science. It's not woo-woo. So it's just science that's subjective. We don't have machines that can measure it. And so in the subtle body, we have three aspects of the subtle body. We have the channels, which are energetic pathways that move through the body, and there's thousands of these throughout the body. We have and chakras are forms of channels, but let's just use the word channels right now, or we call them sa in Tibetan. We have the lung, or the wind energy, and this is the energy of movement in the body, right? And the wind energy moves through those channels. The channels are like the highways. The wind energy is like the cars. And then we have the tigle, which are a little more, harder to explain. But the tigle are drops of energy that move throughout the body. And the tigle are most associated with mind, but they're mind at the level of energy, right? So don't worry too much. I'm going, Elaine, I know I'm going a little out there, but I'm going to bring it back home in a second, which is that, so primarily in this practice, we're working with the wind energy and the channels, because one perspective is that the trauma, let's just use Western language now, Western therapy modality, trauma sits at the level of the channel. It's the channel that actually holds the trauma. Now, again, I think the psyche holds trauma too, and that's what gets worked out through talk therapy and cognitive-based therapies. But the channel trauma doesn't get completely resolved necessarily. It can, but this is why sometimes people do other kinds of modes of work, and it helps because, I believe certain plant medicines can work on the chakra, on the channels, etc. But here, what we're doing is we're connecting with the beautiful monster itself, let's say the trauma, for just use that word, and we're not doing anything with it, but by being with it, the channel can correct itself, because the channels are kind of like, they have their own natural knots and twists when we're born, and that's the Buddhist path. We use we do practices in Buddhism to work with the channels and opening the channels in tantric practice, but that's something I'm not going to go into. Here we're just talking about healthy human being stuff. But over our life, we also get bends and twists in the channels due to mini traumas, more serious, complex traumas, and then just sort of as we form our personality and being. So it's really interesting. That's one of I'm just putting that out there to share that with some of you who want that kind of nerdy level of this. But also, it's interesting because it's sort of like, where does trauma live? Does it live in the thoughts? Does it live somewhere in the body? It's interesting. So this is the approach here. It's in the channels, but the practice is the same. From this perspective, we're working with it through feeling and being. But yeah, so that you got, so now I just wanted to give some feedback on your actual experience, if it's okay. Wonderful. It sounded like, for me, I just got really relaxed too. I didn't have anything particularly kind of strong, though I did notice, like, I'm just tired today for some reason. I don't know why. I think I've just been working a lot and tired. And so it was nice to just sort of be with the body and feel and just not push anything. Not push on anything, not try to be anything, not try to do anything. And then I noticed a smile, like inside, So I said, oh, so I wasn't too far off, from the essence love, just a little smile. So sometimes it's like that. But earlier today, I got really, not really angry, but I got kind of angry earlier today. And so, I did the same practice, but I did it, allowing now this is tricky. Allowing anger doesn't mean I'm letting it out. Allowing anger means I'm feeling it and meeting it in the body. And I'm not suppressing it, but I'm also not becoming it. right? Which is hard. When I'm really angry, that's really hard. When I'm just annoyed, I can do that, you know? So we train in the practice, and it gets easier to be with things that are more intense, right? But yeah, wonderful, Elaine. I'm just giving some kind of, you prompted some thoughts for me, but also just, yeah, keep going. Awesome. Yeah. Anyone else? We got 10 minutes. If anyone else wants to share any questions, yeah, please. Margaret.
Hi.
Hey.
This might be a little bit off track, but it kind of fascinated me. I recently heard that going to bed and sleeping between 9 and 3, it's because of the wind energy.
Mhm.
And you had mentioned, wind energy, and I was just wondering if you could, talk a little bit more about that in the context of sleep and time and the timing of sleep.
Yeah, no, I never heard that before. Was there anything more to that? Like it helped with a certain kind of wind, because we have different kinds of wind energy in the body. Was there anything like it helped with, like speediness or something like that? Or
Well, it's interesting because I actually heard it from Kondala, and I learned that the Dalai Lama, that's the time when he sleeps. So
okay.
I thought, wow, this is something that I'd like to really know about. And I apologize because I know it's not exactly along, what you've been talking about, but
Got it. Though I think I understand the context. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I know the Dalai Lama, that's his kind of, he sleeps between 9 and 3, and then he wakes up for practice at that time, because then his kind of activities start around 9 a.m. I think, because he practices for about 6 hours or something every day. Yeah, I think that's, I don't know, but I think that's referring more to, so in Tantra, we're working with different practices in Tantric Buddhism or Vajrayana Buddhism, but we're also working with the subtle body. And we're trying to kind of, like, one part of it is we're trying to, how do you put it? Not adapt, but like, can't think of the word, when you're like taking advantage of something to use it in a helpful way, I'll think of the word, but I can't think of it right now. So something like that, where the body, both the physical body and the subtle body, which includes the wind energy, it has its own cycles and times as well. We take a certain amount of breaths in the day. We have a certain amount of breaths in our lifetime that relates to the wind energy. Also, this is where it gets a little bit, Tibet, like I said, in Tibet, it's just a science. It's not like a new age thing, but the moon cycles affect our subtle body and wind energy. In Tantric Buddhism, we have soak days where we do certain practices every 2 weeks. And there's a lot of reasons we do those practices, but they're chosen astrologically as well. And the reason is because certain wind energies are moving in those days in the month. Certain energies in the world are moving, so we're doing certain practices, right? So yeah, I don't know the exact reason about that 9 to 3 a.m. with the wind energy, but it makes sense for the reasons I'm sharing now. Because there's a way the energies circle in the 24-hour clock, as well as in certain days of the year, certain days of the month. But that's cool. I'd like to hear more of what she said about that. Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sure, Elaine. Yeah.
Can you spell that wind energy? I don't know if you're saying wind,
like windy.
like as in
wind.
blowing the wind.
Yeah, the Tibetan word is lung, and then in Sanskrit it's prana.
Oh, wait,
But
someone's holding up a book.
yeah, wind, as in wind. And I mean, there's different translations. Sometimes people translate it as energy, or I like the term wind energy, but it just means it's a subtle energy in the body. It's the energy of movement, right?
Okay.
Yeah. In Tibetan, they call it lung. In Sanskrit, prana. Probably it's the same in Chinese, qi. It's probably similar.
Okay, chi, I know.
Yeah. It's just the energy of movement in both in the body and external in the world. There's wind, not literal wind. It's something more
Right.
subtle, right? Yeah. Yeah. Don't worry about it right now. There's a lot coming at you, Elaine, tonight for like someone new to this. So yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? We got a few minutes. Fernando, Sergio.
No, it's just that I heard about Lung, and then I started to think about all the translations into different languages, Ki in Japan, Chi in China.
Sure.
And I remember, since Margaret mentioned about the times, I mean, I know that His Holiness the Dalai Lama starts his practice at 3 a.m. because of certain energies at that time. And it reminded me of the dream yoga. And I remember Namki Norbu book about that time during the day. So yeah,
Cool.
Just made me think of that. So.
Thank you. Yeah. Awesome. Sergio, you had something, yeah?
Yeah, I just wanna say that it was a beautiful practice. Thank you. And I have, I actually become very relaxed, but I was very aware of the feelings that they came out, and it was very interesting because at the beginning I wanted to think about it, and I wanted to put order into it, and then all of a sudden I let it go, like you guided, and it was precious because it was so valuable. Like all of a sudden everything just became harmony, and it was very beautiful. I had to say thank you. Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
teaching us this.
My
yes,
pleasure.
I'm super new Buddhism as well. I think I got into Buddhism long time ago. The first Lama that I actually met was Lama Sopa Rinpoche in Nepal. But from there to here, I haven't actually get into deep practice or anything studying the Dharma. But I'm back here, and I appreciate you having us tonight.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks so much, Sergio. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe I'll say it now so I don't forget. I think Patty's going to put a link, but I have some guided meditations if you want to kind of follow up on this practice. If you sign up for my newsletter, you get you can, and I don't care if you stay on it, you can cancel the newsletter, but there's 8 guided meditations I just give out as like a gift. And then 2 of them are called Compassionate Presence to Feelings. And there's a short and a long version, and that's the practice we did tonight. As well, I don't know, Patty, maybe you could put it in there, fullybeing.org. This is another resource, which is, Lama Zopa Rinpoche is one of my root teachers, and my other root teacher is Sonia Rinpoche, and he has a course where he goes into a lot of detail on this practice. So if you want to go into like even more detail, and I believe there's a version that's a 2-week, there's like a free version. So if you just want to check it out, you can do that one. And then, of course, it's very low cost to actually do the course, the full course. So yeah, check those resources out if you like this practice.
Awesome.
Yeah, as I said, I'm going to also I have my own kind of mentoring community, and I do seasonal courses with the mentees, and probably the fall course, September, October, November, is going to be on this practice as well as a lot of other somatic ones. There's like 2 more I wanted to share with you, but it's just one. We only have an hour and a half, so I don't have time. But yeah, that's available too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else just before we jump off, Kelly? I know you can sit there. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to.
Yeah, no, I have a question just on the practical level. I mean, first, I loved that practice a lot. Thank you. Is this something? So I do a lot of shamatha, the Vipassana meditation. Is this a practice that you would implement like on a daily level, or like you would or is this sort of like in response to something, like something happens in life and you're like, okay, I'm going to do some dropping? How are you implementing this practice?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah. It's a kind of it's a both, because I think for a lot of us, we're not used to this way of working with our feeling world. So it would be a formal practice at first. And then when we feel kind of some proficiency in it, we can bring it into the day. So like for me, I did it as a formal, part of my daily practice for a long time. And then it just kind of became a part of the way I work with myself. Like throughout the day, I do a combination of Dharma practice, but this is one of the main ones I do, as needed. I kind of recommend embodiment in general throughout the day, because there's something there that keeps a connection to the, like I was alluding to, the non-intellectual experiential aspects of the Dharma. It helps me there. But the handshake in particular, it just becomes a way of life at some point. It's a little tricky when we're bringing it into the life, because if we're only bringing it in when there's uncomfort, we could be using it as a method to fix something. So that's the only caveat I would put, is it's sort of like we're not using it as a fixing thing. We're using it more as a way of opening up relationship, opening up this sense of being with our full human experience. And so I just kind of use it too, even when when I'm high. I call it, this expression is, people still use it, like high on the hog. Do people still use that expression at all? Maybe in certain places in the United States. When we're high on the hog, high on the horse, it's also good to kind of like feel pride. Feel meaning like be with pride compassionately, right? Be with, so it doesn't have to just be uncomfortable emotions. As a Dharma practitioner, we can kind of open to everything. And then for me, this kind of just blends with Mahamudra practice. So it's just sort of it's the somatic part of the Mahamudra for me, practices. And it categorically, I would put this as a Vipassana practice. It's a little more of a Vipassana practice, even though it's not directly aiming at emptiness. Sometimes we can flirt with those, spaces. So try it formally. Then when you feel comfortable, then you bring it in the day.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Yeah.
Hi, Scott. This is Peter. Sorry about that. I was trying to get the video to work. But
no worry. I appreciate that, Peter.
Can you see me?
Yeah, you're all good.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I got exposed to Buddhism maybe 10, 12 years ago. I've read most of Dalai Lama's books, and what you did tonight, I have a lot of trouble meditating, and my monkey mind is going at 100 miles an hour all the time. So what you did tonight was really good. It relaxed me a lot, and it focused me. One thing I remember reading an interview, Pema Chodron. I don't know if you're yet. And one thing, I've forgotten most of what she said, but there was one phrase that she said that stuck with me that I use often. It's like, relax into the discomfort of the situation, just kind of what you were saying. Just accept it. Just let it. Don't. I just thought I'd share that. That's all.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. Definitely, it's related. She talks a lot about how to meet. Because really, when we look at the Buddhist path, the way to, this is my belief now, based on a lot of Buddhist study and practice over the years. I think the way to what we think of as enlightenment is through suffering. A lot of the time, like the languaging seems like we're going beyond suffering, but in order to go beyond it, we go through it. That's been my experience. And it's just sort of like, that's why Buddhism is not an easy lift for people. It's also easy to bypass suffering, with all the highfalutin teachings. But actually, when we go back to the foundations of Buddhism, it's how to work with suffering. So Pema Chodron, she's often, I'm trying to remember, one of her books is called No Way Out. That's one of her books. There's another well-known one I'm thinking of that talks about this. There's another resource I have for you guys too, which is so Sony Rinpoche, where this practice comes from. He also, him and Daniel Goleman, who's a well-known like kind of like a researcher, psychologist. They have a book called Why We Meditate. And so, that's a great book to get. That just came out, I think at the end of last year or the beginning of this year. And it goes into this practice in detail. If you're kind of like, some people are more auditory. If you're more like, you need to read it and it starts to make sense, that's a good resource for it too.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank you.
Peter. That's awesome. Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, maybe we'll wrap it up. Oh yeah, Patty put it there, Why We Meditate. Yeah, I highly recommend that book. Yeah, and in general, just feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions on this. I mentor people on these things. So if you need a little bit more hands-on work with someone, I do that kind of work. That's something I specialize in, is one-to-one work. Yeah. Also, you're free to kind of check out the mentoring community too. Right now we're going through the 37 practices of a bodhisattva in detail, but I think in the fall we're gonna focus on somatic practice for meditators. We'll see. I'm gonna poll the community, but yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking. So yeah, I really enjoyed it with you guys. You guys are awesome, and I really appreciate you taking the time to work on this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott and Patty.
Yeah. Thanks, Patty.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and come next week, we're going to do 3 principal aspects of for those of you who I'm going to switch roles a bit and kind of go into a little bit more traditional teaching next week for 3 weeks, right, Patty? We got a 3-week. Yeah. So 3 weeks on Lama Tsongkhapa's texts, 3 principal aspects of the past. So if you want like an A to Z of Buddha Dharma, that's what we're going to do for 3 weeks, starting next Thursday.
Yeah, the 13th, 20th, and 27th, same time.
Yeah, so it'll be a little different than this, but I'll try to make it experiential and practice based. But there's a lot to go through because I'm going to go through the whole text. Really, some of you know that text, Lama Tsongkhapa's text, 3 principal aspects of the path. No, okay. So it's for me, it's my favorite Lam. You all know what Lam Rim is, right? Like that's kind of essential stuff. The
I looked it up.
Okay, yeah, graduated stages of the path. And it's my favorite Lam Rim text because it's really pithy and short, but it's really deep and complete. And so I like teaching on it because it really, like I said, it's like A to Z. It's one of my desert island Buddhist texts. If I were to end up on a desert island, that would be one I'd want to have with me. Yeah.
Is it possible to get the link for that? I didn't get the full name.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. What was it?
Sergio wants the link because he didn't get the email.
Oh,
I didn't get the full name of the last book that you recommend.
That's in the chat. I think Patty put the Amazon link there for the book, is what you're asking?
The meditate one is there, but I think he's talking about the last.
Yeah, you
book.
said the 3 principal aspects.
Oh, the 3 principal aspects. I think we're going to give it's a short text. Maybe Patty will probably email it to people.
Oh, okay. It's not a book.
I will certainly do that. To everybody that's registered, I will definitely email the a link to the book. I think on FPMT, you can probably get it as a PDF for a donation, but we'll figure it out. Yeah.
There's a translation I like, so I'll send it to you, Patty, and then you can send it out to people. Yeah. It's just a PDF because it's only a few pages.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
So much, Scott.
Thank you.
Yeah. Lots of love. Happy practice.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Be well.
Ciao. Hasta luego.